Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dan Wagner, Emma Higgins, and David Galinsky.
Take the cherry.
Okay,
Ready to go?
we're ready.
Good. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Wagner. There's some water here. And I'm the CEO of Civis Analytics. We're a data science platform company based in Chicago, Illinois, and a technology partner to McDonald's. Today, I'm going to tell a love story. I know Emma Stone's in the other room. This may not be as good as hers, but this is a love story between data scientists and marketers, a relationship often fraught with difficulties, misunderstandings, and lack of clarity and purpose. And today we're going to talk about how an organization has come together to figure out how to make that relationship successful and productive. And we're calling that story Bringing Data to Big Macs. This presentation has been good for a few reasons. Number one is to talk to you why this is important. Number two is how this is working on the ground. And number three, which I think is the most important, is how these two groups of people have come together to make this an effective partnership for improving business results with marketing. These two folks are really the people who operated on the ground. So let's turn it over to them to intro them and tell us a little bit about them to get started.
Sure. So in this love story, I guess I'm on the data science side. So maybe I'm the Shrek. Well, but yeah. I lead our customer data science team at McDonald's. It's a relatively new department in the organization, and what I oversee is anything related to the utilization of customer data to make more informed decisions.
And I'm the media sciences manager, so I deal with anything that's data or measurement related to our paid media or the creative that works with it.
Okay, great. So let's start with the punchline. At the end of the day, the most important thing is to connect to results. And that's always been one of the main tensions in business is you have marketing dollars over here, you have business results over here, and creating a clear mapping between the money that you're spending and what you're getting at the end. So beginning with that punchline, what have you all been able to achieve in your relationship, and how has that gone?
Yeah, so through all of our advanced data use, we're able to achieve results that are roughly 3 to 5 times higher than those of traditional ways of working.
Yeah, and again, this is all through the utilization of customer data that we've been able to capture over the past 3 or 4 years with our digital transformation. So development of our mobile app as well as in-store kiosks and things of that nature.
Got it. Well, let's go back to the beginning, which is you show up in 2015, you show up a little bit later. Tell me about the transformations that are occurring in the industry at the time.
Yeah, so McDonald's sits in the QSR industry, quick service restaurant industry. I would say the industry in general was probably one of the last to adopt digital properties. So when I got there, we were just starting up our digital transformation, and that really came from top down from our CEO, Steve Easterbrook. And I arrived as the second analytics person. So I got there during a period of time where we'd launched our digital properties, but we didn't really have a mechanism of, like really good mechanisms in place of collecting that data, which is obviously very important, structuring it, and then using it in a way to better inform our decisions. So that was really the landscape once I got there. We really relied more heavily on, engagement metrics like click-through rates and things like that. We used brand trackers, so looking at things like purchase intent in the past to measure our marketing activity. But really, digital gave us the ability to get to more direct attribution and an impact on sales, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
So when you think about how David and I work together, David, I would say, leads more of the insights, and then I help channel those insights into activation. So as David was able to collect the data, enrich the data, and analyze or model the data, then I could become the conduit to help us figure out how do we advance the way that we're activating our media, measuring our media, and then making optimizations on it.
Okay, great. So you show up, it's day one, and a lot of people are thinking about this question, is I bring my data scientist, what do I put them to work on day one? So you come in, you show up, what are some of the main problems that you see in the marketing division in terms of the work that we're doing in light of this transition? What are some of those problems, and what are some of the immediate opportunities that you notice?
Yeah, I think it starts with just having a good metric that correlates with your overall sales. Because otherwise, as I was kind of alluding to previously, if you're merely looking at things like engagement, or even in some cases, brand perception trackers and purchase intent metrics, more brand KPIs, it's hard to convince leadership that these metrics correlate to top-line business performance. So right off the bat, acquiring new data from our digital properties gave us the ability to really look at direct attribution. So if someone converts through one of our digital properties, they download the app, they go and present it at the point of sale, we can capture that transaction, we can capture information about what customers' purchase behaviors are and things like that. And we actually have a direct line that lets us know that person XYZ actually transacted after being exposed to a number of different ads and a sequence of ads.
So shameless plug, everyone should download the app. Lots of good deals in there. But it really allows us to develop a direct relationship with the customer and really give them a more personalized experience and use that as a feedback loop so that we can learn more about them and become even more personalized for them. So obviously this is good for McDonald's because it helps us be more effective and more efficient with our marketing efforts. But truly it's good for the consumer as well because the last thing you as a consumer want is an ad that you don't care about. You're much more interested in an ad that's relevant and personalized to you.
Got it. So you see this kind of list of problems and opportunities. Where does your work start and how is it implemented?
Yeah.
Very brass tacks.
Yep. It's first of all, you have to collect that data at a single repository, data warehouse, so you can feed that data directly into it. Then there's a whole bunch of structuring that you need to do to make sure that data is conducive towards analytics. So that is really the most challenging part, is getting all of the infrastructure in place. Because then with digital properties as well, you're getting clickstream data in there too. So you've got to find a way of tying all of your transactional data. You have to tie all of your engagement data to really build out this whole 360-degree view of the customer.
And David, one question is, a lot of businesses have made their investments in data warehouses, which has an IT function, but you're a data scientist. What's the difference between the investment that you're making versus the traditional investment that a corporation makes in IT data warehouses?
Yeah, so it's really finding people with the analytical chops, really the analytical mindset. It's one thing to go and pull data and report out on it. It's another thing to, innately be able to kind of relay the business problems that exist with the organization and find creative ways of solving that. And that's really where data science and analytics come into play. And that's the skill that the company really has started to invest more heavily in.
Got it.
On the flip side, there's also opportunity to democratize the data, and I joke because David and I kind of hate that
Term.
Thank you. But when you think about people that might be like me that might not be able to write out a SQL code and pull a list of first-party customers to activate against, that also presents a challenge. So one thing that we've worked with you guys to do is build a list cutter tool. So it's a way for somebody like me or our agency partners to really go in and easily pull out the segment that they want so that we can activate against that segment. So it's a way to take the business knowledge and then apply it to the data without necessarily having to have all the background.
Okay, well, let's dig into that, which is practical implementation, which is where a lot of businesses struggle, which is in building this kind of clear mapping from data science to or marketing to sales outcomes. People struggle with it. You talk about the data. What are some of the other steps that you've gone through from day one to today to make sure that you have sensible implementation of data science to improve marketing? We'll start with the nerdy stuff, which you guys and I are pretty familiar with, and then the kind of implementation practices that you built together.
Perfect.
Yeah, so just starting and building the guts of something like this, obviously, is as I was saying, is the most challenging part. So piecing all the data together that's sitting across silos in the organization and being able to put it in a single place, whereas a data scientist like me could go in, get all the attributes that I need about my customers, whether it's transactional data, whether it's engagement data, whether it's third-party data, things like that, consolidated in one place so that I could start my modeling. Then once I do that, there's things that I could gradually start to automate. So I could automate some reporting that people like Emma and other folks on our marketing team can then go and leverage. And then meanwhile, while they're absorbing the insights from the reports, we're continuing to churn out models that are better understanding customers' propensities to transact or behave in certain ways.
Got it. Oh, sorry.
So then we took some of the models that David was able to build, and you have to make sure that when you're testing it, you're truly testing it and you're not just trying it. So set up an experimental design so that we could say, of these models that David built, if we then give messaging that's more relevant to those. So say you're a chicken person. Can we give the chicken people a chicken message rather than a burger message? So we set up the test so that one group, our control group, could get an even rotation of all of our messaging. And then our test groups had chicken gets chicken, burger gets burger, or something like that. And what we did see was that the results were 3 to 5 times stronger with our test group than our control. So we have proof that that's working. We did that in a small piece of our media, so now we can extrapolate it to other areas.
Got it. So you talked a lot about modeling, and modeling has, there's a lot of jargon around it. So you have, from my understanding, you have 2 different sets of data. You have your in-store data, then you have lots of these exterior data sources from the outside world. How did you, what are you doing with those different points of data? And then how are you leveraging those first-party and third-party data sets or together through a join to make sure that you're able to help the marketing team?
Yeah, so I think it starts just kind of keeping things simple. So something as basic as just segmenting your customers based off of their behavior is a really good way to tee things up. It's easy to understand. It's digestible by people in the marketing organization. As nerdy as us data scientists are, we also, my team is really good at developing personas using lingo that marketers understand. So, we do that. We overlay some third-party data to better understand, indices against different segments, and then are able to just generate insights that help marketers understand whether or not, they have the right target, or whether or not they should be looking at some of these other attributes as, a means to better acquire customers. So these are some of the things that we could start to look at, leveraging the data science techniques to relay over into the hands of the marketers.
Got it. So what teams are part of this? Typically in a marketing organizations, you have lots of players, or at least in a marketing function, you have lots of players. You have you guys, the marketing team, the media team, the agency, et cetera. How do you, well, from what we've seen, this has been the biggest struggle, is you have a common purpose, which is improve sales. You have a set of shared resources, which is the labor and capital of the team. How do you figure out the assembly of everybody to have a process and a set of teamwork that actually works to get this done?
Yeah, we have a ton of teams involved. At the McDonald side, we have our media team, we have our content team, we have our menu team. Everybody has processes in place that were in place before we were a part of the team. We also have really strong agency partnerships. So we have a media agency, we have a creative agency, and we have a marketing sciences team that sits across both. So those are key partners for us and great partners for us that help us implement these types of things. As we think about how we get people on board to integrate us into their process, I think there's a couple of tactics that we've used. One is finding advocates, so finding people that get it, they're interested, they're on board, and they want to understand what these insights are so that they can apply them. And the other is by giving examples. So, you have to essentially drive the car while you're building it, but you have to show people examples and show them results as you're going, to say, like, a lot of people are interested, like, yeah, customer data sounds great. They need to know, like, how do I use this? What does it mean to me as somebody who's building a McCafe spot? What does that mean to me as somebody who's activating our TV strategy? Yeah. You have to make sure that you're giving them examples with proof point along the way.
And with your agency, so there's a lot of agency folks here, and how do you both use your new customer data set to inform what types of campaigns the agencies can run based on what you're seeing? So that's the push. And how do you answer questions that the agency might have from what you're seeing in the behavioral data that you're producing?
Yeah, for us, part of it is a strong partnership. So we want to make sure that we're sharing data and sharing access across us and the agency, which is awesome. And I think with that understanding that there's unique things that you can learn from your customer data, and there are other things that you can learn from other more attitudinal or survey data that can help augment that, and figuring out how to use the right data at the right time.
And we're big users of the Civis platform, as Dan knows, and we've given access to the Civis platform to not just folks in our organization, but people more broadly, including our agency partners. So the great thing about that is we're all working off the same script. None of us are really deviating and doing our own thing. We have a single source of truth for our data. We have a single source of truth for our segmentation. And granted, that changes over time, but we're always looking at the same segments. We're always looking at the same data. We are always accessing the latest analysis that we've done within the platform. So that's really helped in kind of being that guiding, unifying force across all stakeholders to unite behind more data-driven marketing.
One of the questions that we've seen from marketers is two key themes. One is repeatability, and two is scale. Sometimes marketers have the same questions over and over and over again, but there's too few Davids. The ratio of Davids to MOs is a little bit off, especially as the volume of questions tends to increase. So
trying to change that.
Yeah, you're trying to work
working
on it, but it's just a problem in the market is we need more data scientists. So how have you used technology, and what are you going to use your technology for to help increase the number of questions and how you answer those questions on a more scalable basis?
Yeah, it's really kind of the 80-20 rule in this case. It's what are the biggest rocks, what are the biggest questions that we're really trying to answer, and then taking us as a data science team, and also have data visualization folks on my team as well, building out tools to kind of automate the insights and answers to the majority of the questions that the marketing team wants, while concurrently working to test, learn, and optimize our models on the back end. So that's given us the ability to kind of try to keep ahead, but that's definitely a big problem. We're constantly getting, once people get a cool piece of insight, they want 10 pieces more. So keeping up with that pace is definitely difficult, but definitely need to automate most of the questions while making sure that your team's dedicated to trying to solve the others.
We're becoming less reliant on traditional PowerPoints as a way of sharing information, which is not an overnight task, nor is it an easy feat, I think one thing about PowerPoint is everybody knows, okay, what needs to be in there. So as somebody trying to communicate across multiple teams, if you don't have a PowerPoint template, making sure that you're able to communicate that across, I think, is a learning process. But figuring out how you can use dashboards, how you can use things that are more automated to tell those same stories.
Got it. So there's a couple levels of people within an organization. You obviously have you have the people who are in charge of tactical implementation, and then you have your CMO, CEO, et cetera. What assets are you producing so that leadership can understand what you're doing, what's working, and what are some recommendations that you can do in the future?
So yeah, our president, we're in the U.S. organization. Our president is an avid Tableau user, so we're very lucky in that regard. So we have reports that we generate up to that level. We have reports that we generate up to our officer, who's the chief marketing officer.
But your president uses Tableau.
Yeah, yeah, on his phone too. And I just generally think once people get the hang of it, having some ability to kind of set your own filters and look at the data in the way that you want to answer the specific questions that people are asking of our president, Chris, or our CMO, Morgan, it really empowers them to, really empowers them and helps guide their decision making and makes them feel smarter in meetings with their superiors or board of directors and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, all that people really care about is, does it work? Which has been a struggle, frankly, especially as people have traditionally relied upon large mass media. It's kind of difficult to understand whether or not somebody is leading something, a major campaign is leading to brand lifter sales. How have you guys solved this problem?
Ongoing process.
Ongoing process, okay.
Yeah, but I think ultimately at the core of it, it's finding metrics that are more closely related, better proxies for sales data to make sure that we're making decisions off of data that mirrors what we're seeing from a business perspective.
Okay.
And in the case where we do, achieve critical mass, and I'm not by any means saying that we have tens of millions of digital customers where we have the ability to get to transaction level data. In that case, we don't need to spend tons and tons of paid media on those customers. In many instances, we can leverage our own channels like email, the mobile app, or SMS push notifications and things like that to reach our customers in a more personalized, cost-effective manner.
Well, walk me through a test. So we talked about the 3 to 5x lift before. How did you run that test and identify that effect?
Yeah, so I would say key piece there is working with our agency. You asked about teams that we work with, and they were integral to this process. So it was really making sure that we all aligned that we wanted to run this test. And then we established a very clear test design. So making sure that we understood what was the control group, what was the test group, what was the time period, what was the KPI, how are we going to measure it, who's going to be measuring it. And so then as we ran our control group with the rotating creatives and the test groups with each individualized and personalized creative, then as we looked through the results, could make sure that we could apply that to other areas as well.
And we're talking about, in the hundreds of thousands to millions of customers for these tests. So, gone are the days where we have to rely on a group of 50 customers to run a purchase intent study. The great thing about the digital transformation and customer data is it allows us to actually be able to produce enormous panel, reach out to an enormous panel of customers.
What's the volume of data you're talking about?
So without getting to a pinpoint number, because trying to be cognizant of in investor meetings, we're in the tens of millions of customers and the hundreds of millions of transactions.
Okay, got it. So it's good we can see one test, but what a lot of people care about is how do they build a real process where they can both think about what a good campaign is, test that campaign in market, build results, and then modify that over time and do this as a continuous scientific test and learn process. So we got it in this one case. How are you thinking about building that process in this lovely love story between the data science team and the marketing team such that you continue to get better over time?
I think that's definitely it, like making sure that as we continue each campaign, as we continue each initiative, we're making sure that we have a clear test plan. We've established long-term goals, or I guess long-term questions that we want to answer, so that as we go through each smaller initiative, we're setting them up so that we can answer each of those bigger questions with smaller tests in each campaign.
Okay.
And assuming that we are running the test on a representative group of the overall customer base, that's where we do some of these testing. And testing has to be ongoing and iterative. So establishing a test and learn center of excellence in an organization is critical. And keep on testing things on a small scale. That's what we've been doing. And then take those insights that we're getting in a given test, an XYZ test, being able to identify what sort of specific insights, what sort of customers you saw that lift from, to then go and project it across your mass media properties. That is that is what we've precisely been doing. So when Emma mentioned things like segmentation, taking behaviorally driven segments that we've built, finding what those predictors of sales are, where they over/under index, and going and projecting that on a larger audience via lookalike modeling, or just generally via mass media channels that we see similar types of indices with our customer base. That's where we've been starting to go.
Got it. Tell me about buy-in. How do you get people to believe what you are doing?
Results. I mean, the results, you've got to run successful tests. You've got to show that what you've been doing impacts the business. And if you don't, it's not going to last that long,
Yeah.
right? You got to show results.
Yeah.
Finding advocates is another key piece. So some people are just more naturally inclined to gravitate towards this than others. So find your people in each of your teams that can speak on your behalf to their teammates, because they might be able to speak in a language that's closer to what their team's doing on a day in, day out basis than you can.
Sure. Okay, so you're thinking about the future, obviously. We've talked about the past, the present. What are you going to do in the future to continue to enhance this effort at McDonald's?
Yeah, I think with as digital adoption grows, and it's been widely circulated on the news channels these days and through PR that McDonald's is really trying to go digital. This is only going to increase the amount of customer data that we have at our fingertips. So by increasing the pool of digital customers, by better understanding the touch points that these customers engage with, we can only get smarter and smarter and smarter. And ultimately, we get to a point where, like I was alluding to earlier, we're less reliant on really mass, and we can start getting more towards personalization and media efficacy.
The biggest project on my horizon that I'm super excited about, that I'm working with you guys on, is right now, as we measure our media, our key KPI is really tied around behavioral location data. And what we're working to understand is, additionally, we're marketers, so we want to change perception as well as change behavior. So how do we understand our changes in attitudes, the changes in behavior, and how do they correlate to one another and work together? Okay,
so one thing you talked a lot about was the democratization of data science. As you think 5-10 years out into the future, what does the data-driven marketing organization of the future look like? So when you're CMO in approximately 2 years, what does this organization look like, and how is it interacting with people like David?
I think one of the biggest changes will be that sometimes it feels like we may be forcing customer data into processes, and it'll just be naturally baked in and ingrained, so people aren't thinking as it as an extra step. It's just the natural part of the process to always be using customer data to inform their decision.
And what will the relationship with the agency look like?
I think they'll also be on the same page, using customer data, working hand in hand with us.
Got it. Okay. So we're going to turn it over for questions from the audience in a second, but if people could take away one lesson from this conversation today, what would that be? Start with you.
Find your advocates.
Okay.
Get people on board.
Personalization drives business impact. As personal as you can get, as relevant as you can get, the more efficient you get.
Okay, good. Well, we'll turn it over. We got questions from the audience, and we'll go from there. Okay, I can see you right there. My eyes are a little like this. I think I can see you.
I'll just yell then. Okay. Well, thank you very much. The panel was great. I have a quick question, if I can ask, on data sourcing. I work in consumer to business data exchange. So how much of an issue in digital transformation, in data, in customization, is walled gardens? And how valuable to you would it be if you could get data on your customers from behind those walled gardens without having to deal with the walled gardens?
Yeah, I could start, and I could piggyback off it. Definitely right within our wheelhouse. Obviously, the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world, don't necessarily play too nice in our ability to collect all digital touch points. So there are ways that, from a data science, advanced analytics standpoint, we have to kind of try to control for that. But yeah, it's a big challenge that we're facing right now, and it just gives us an incomplete data set. We know how big the reach is on those channels. We know how many people actively engage with the walled gardens, but we don't necessarily know how effective it is. So, at a certain point, we've got to be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of those properties too. And I just think it's going to take all advertisers to come together and kind of try to force those walls to come down for the sake of transparency. Because as we continue to grow in being able to really, really understand business media's performance on business impact, there's going to have to be an ROI associated with those properties.
And does the fact that you now have this customer data set enhance your ability to measure the efficacy of those different placement options?
It's just still a big unknown, and we just have to hold that as kind of a control in our something we have to try our best to control for when we're trying to better understand the performance of it.
So I would say there are definitely, and we have ways to understand walled gardens performance in isolation. The question becomes, how do walled gardens perform in the context of all of our other media that's running? So back to your question, I think it would depend on what data you're able to provide from the walled gardens. If it's more of profiling customer data, it's interesting. It might be stuff that we might be able to get from other sources or from the walled gardens. But if it's a matter of exposure at the individual level, I think that would be the most compelling data.
Okay, well, let's take this question right here. Has marketing investment shifted from people you know nothing about to being allocated to target those people you have a piece of data on? So Emma, you're working on this question tactically every day. What's your response?
100%. Not 100% of our media has shifted, but 100% it has changed.
Some types of insights?
Yeah, so on my side of the house, I generate the insights, whether or not the Emmas of the world or the CRM team wants to action off of that. I push on them as much as possible to keep this love story going, obviously. Yeah, sometimes it's analysis for the pure sake of insight, to better guide just general marketing strategy or general business strategy. The ability to collect customer data allows us to go beyond just looking at things like transactions and sales and understand things like frequency, which we never had before. Understand things like customer attrition or new customer acquisition that we've never had the ability to do before. So allowing us to get more diagnostic and understanding why we're performing really well or why we're not performing as well as we'd like to, this data has been critical in helping us get a lot more diagnostic.
The other downside of transactional data is there's no way to link it to your media. There's no way to link it directly to your media. Obviously, there are modeling ways to understand how the two work together, but that's definitely another advantage of getting it to the customer individual level.
Email address ties to device IDs, to cookies, and things like that. And then collecting that data as well, that's the engagement data that you need to better understand whether or not certain customers are more prone to engaging with certain types of media versus others. And it really helps you understand who's persuadable and who's not. And that's really a concept that Dan and Civis really hammered home working on the Obama 2012 campaign, is understanding how, who's persuadable and making sure that you're targeting who's persuadable and not so much who's not persuadable.
Okay, more questions?
So from the easiest to connect level from a direct response to a in-app purchase with mobile pay, to the other extreme of more broader branding message to a cash purchase in store. How can you, on that other extreme, how can the data science and analytics help a company and a brand in showing the value and attribution of some of those broader messages, and how those maybe help your franchisees who are paying for that branding message?
Very, very good question. We've done a considerable amount of work in validating both data sets. So looking at how cash customers behave, looking at how cashless customers behave, looking how digital customers behave, and really trying to find the themes of where there's the most overlap. So there's certainly differences in the way the two behave. But I think that what we've found over the course of the past year and a half is there's the two still do behave fairly similarly. A debit card customer tends to behave more similarly to a cash customer than a credit card customer. So there are ways, there are validation mechanisms that we have in place to better understand, how different are these two customers. And the thing that we really look at is, do we see that, if there is a bias, are these biases consistent? So, if 5% of our purchases are for Big Mac with cashless, 2% are with cash, we just want to make sure that those trends remain consistent. Then for modeling purposes, it's perfectly fine.
My last question is for you. How do you currently calculate brand perception? What other ways are you looking to get a more accurate understanding of how customers perceive the brand?
Yeah, we use a variety of different surveys as well as look at our social listening tools. But I think as the project that I'm working with you guys on is really making sure that we're connecting those perception changes with other behavioral changes so that we can make sure that as we look to move perception, that it's actually then impacting our business as a whole, both in the short and the long term.
Got it. Any final words? We have 23 seconds.
Yeah, we'll be around through the next couple days. So if you see us, stop us in the hall. Happy to talk more.
Okay, Emma?
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyway, well, thank you so much. I think this has been a great demonstration of why this is important. Again, how these teams are working together and what the collaboration of data science and marketing has been at McDonald's and what that can potentially mean for other organizations that are trying to get it done. And so with that, we conclude this love story.